but we'll be talking about how we've been building these inclusive jobs in the Diocese of Arlington and how we assist employers to meet their specific needs and really paying attention to the skill set of the job seekers and matching those skill sets, interests, abilities, and their motivation with the employers and how we have progressed in this adventure with the Diocese of Arlington. And I'm Christine Fowler, and I have a nursing background. I have a master's in nursing, and I worked for 20 years before having children, or maybe not that many. And then I realized after having two children with disabilities that I was probably called to be more focused instead of on critical care, but on the disability community. So I am a Special Olympics coach, and I'm on the Special Olympics Council, and I work with Porto Charities, with Porto Works, in developing these opportunities for individuals to work. And so why work? Why are we talking about work at a mental health conference? Well, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning in Genesis, where we read in Genesis 2:15 that the Lord God took man and put him in the garden to till it and keep it. So this was before the fall. So we humans are created for work, and we thrive by having work to do that is in our skill set. And the American Psychological Society Association in 2021 published a handbook on intellectual and developmental disability, and their statement in there was that work is the defining activity of adulthood. So it's not hard to understand why we derive self-esteem, dignity, socialization, community inclusion, financial resources, belonging, a life like everybody else when we can participate in inclusive work. So when I was reading to prepare for this from a mental health perspective, I came across sort of a general health determinants of health, both all social, emotional, physical health. And it kind of boils down to positive relationships, the P's that Mark Bradford was talking about: positive relationships, places, socialization with and without disabilities, people with and without disabilities, and the resources that support that. And then purpose goes back to work, right? When we're working, we really have purpose. And this slide is just showing Morgan, who's the art assistant at St. Leo. She's working with a person without a disability, but yet still socializing, attending group events. This was at Paul VI recently, where there was a mass celebrating their 20th anniversary. And we have a whole bunch of graduates of the options program there together, enjoying each other's company. Then another quote I found from McGuire and Chicoine, who they were co-directors of a Down syndrome clinic in Chicago. There is perhaps nothing as important to an adult's sense of competence and self-esteem as their work. And, mental health is having that emotional well-being that allows us to cope with the activities and stressors of everyday life. And we are seeing that in the workplace, where individuals with disabilities are working, they feel supported, they feel like they're giving support, they feel like they're doing good work, and they derive a lot of self-esteem. That feeling of competence in their work is very much self-esteem building. So you have Zach here. Zach's my son, and he works at St. Leo's as well, and he's helping, I think, kindergartners here with that activity for Kindness Week. And here he's with a group of his colleagues during a course yesterday, a staff development course. And he was presenting on a goal from a committee that he is on. So he's a committee member, just like any other staff member. So he has this whole group of people who are supportive. Again, one of those 3 Ps, which he derives a lot of positive attributes for himself from being part of that group. And here again at Mass, he noticed that the teachers were reminding the children to genuflect as they were leaving from Ash Wednesday Mass. So on his own, realized that that was a role. So again, displaying that competence and having the ability to be proud of his work, and that he's doing real work, and that all of these young adults who are working in the diocese are doing real work, and they are very productive. They feel that they're helping others, and they're also respected for that. And they have supportive coworkers and supervisors. So it's a very positive, uplifting setting and work environment. And when we're talking about developing jobs, we're really talking about the natural settings for work. And the reason we think that's important is because the skills that are learned in natural settings are much more generalizable to life in the community, more independent life in the community. So we're really focusing on those natural settings where individuals with disabilities can work with people without disabilities, with disabilities, and learn new skills on an ongoing basis. So Porto became very interested in employment because we realized that the employment rates for people with IDD were really unacceptably low, somewhere between 15 and 36% of the employment rates. So in 2019, we launched our first pilot to explore this idea of working in the Catholic schools. Of course, with Bishop Burbage's blessing, he thought it was a great idea. So we were able to go forward. And we started by partnering with George Mason Life with 3 parochial schools that were in close geographic proximity to the GMU Life campus, the campus. So that was very helpful. We had Heidi Graf, who had a lot of experience in developing internships. They were able to identify student mentors to perform the job coaching responsibilities and accompany the interns to their jobs. Heidi met with principals, identified the principal's needs for the school, and she was able to match up students because she knew her students very well. She already knew their profile, their positive attributes, what motivated them, what skills they had to bring to a school. So she was able to do that matching process. And then the bishop had said, like, we want 6 schools. So we found 3 other principals who were really interested in joining this pilot. And they were not close enough to George Mason Life to be able to take it, to be able to use the life resources. So we really helped them by finding graduates of the life program and one other person who was already volunteering in a school. We helped match them up into positions that the schools created that matched their skill sets. And we also funded those positions with $10,000. We haven't done that since, but that was how we started with the first pilot. And the outcomes of that pilot were very positive, and all of the schools are continuing to participate in inclusive employment of people with IDD. And from that original 6, we grew through the pandemic, in spite of the pandemic, and in some cases, because of the pandemic, we were able to grow to 20 people total working. And then we reported to Bishop Burbage on those successes and the growth, and he was very happy and excited to hear all of the positive outcomes for people with disabilities and for the schools. And he really wanted to continue to lead this initiative. So he asked us to help develop employment opportunities at the Chancery. And so we met with the CEO, Ward Jones, and Terry D'Elia, the director of HR. And our first roadblock was that they really didn't have any entry-level positions that were open that could capitalize on the gifts of a person with an intellectual disability. And that is where we started to really utilize customized employment to break down that barrier. So what is customized employment? Customized employment is really characterized by discovery. And what discovery is really a very holistic look at a job seeker. So not just looking at their prior experiences of work, because many of our job seekers don't have a long resume, but really looking at what are they doing at home? What are they doing in their community? What are their hobbies? What are their activities? What have they learned through life that will match with the needs of an employer? So we do that discovery process. And then from the employer side, we're really looking at tasks that need to be done rather than job titles. So rather than looking at an entry-level position, we're really saying to an employer, what are your unmet needs? How can we help address needs of your organization to help your organization be more efficient, more effective, more enjoyable to work for? So that is called the needs assessment for an organization. And then what we end up with is a voluntary negotiation of a tailored job that meets the needs of both the job seeker and the employer. So the big win-win is what we're going for. So at the Chancery, we were able to, through that needs assessment that the Chancery did, that Ward Jones and Terry D'Elia, I provided them with a tool that is developed by Mark Golden Associates, which is a company that's been doing customized employment education and training for years. They had a tool on their website, and so I was able to share that with Terry and Ward, and they took that and gave it to all their directors, and the directors looked at their needs, and they came up with these tasks that were able to be clustered into new job descriptions. And while they were doing that, I was reaching out to people who I knew wanted to work in the diocese, who are willing to commute to Arlington. And I was doing that discovery process and developing their positive personal profile. So we were able to develop 3 jobs, and Jeanette is one. She's the greeter, and she collects the mail in the afternoon. So greeter in the morning, collects the mail in the afternoon throughout the entire office building, which is a 10-story office building. And Emma is working in the Office of Catholic Schools and the Office of Development at the Chancery. So she does a lot of different tasks and is very successful. She has a complicated filing project in the Office of Catholic Schools, and she also does a lot of mailing and labeling for the Office of Development. And her unique job description, job design was able to decrease backlogs in materials management. So all this shredding was getting done when it hadn't been before, or not as quickly as it needed to get done. And also by doing the filing, her supervisor did not need to leave her desk to go to do the filing project. And when her supervisor would leave her desk, another person would have to come to this desk because somebody always needed to be at the front desk. And that would leave the other person's work unattended. So by putting Emma in this position, it really improved the workflow for 2 full-time employees in that office. And these are a few more pictures of all of the tasks that Emma is completing in the Office of Catholic Schools, in the shredding, and in the development office. So since starting this project, what have we learned? We've learned that collaboration and commitment are #1 key to success. It takes a village, and we really had it, and we still do. We really have great partnerships and collaborations. So Diane Elliott was with it from the beginning, from phase 1. And of course, Bishop Burbidge, who was our #1 champion, internal champion, and continues to be. And as I mentioned, Heidi Graf was really instrumental in helping us get off to a really good, successful start. And we had principals from Nativity, Maria Kelly, and Dave DePippa from St. Leo's, who jumped in and welcomed interns with disabilities in their schools. And so I guess one of the important things is, what is Porto doing differently than the structures, the normal path for people with disabilities to seek work or to find employment? And it really comes down to that customized approach, that we're really looking at the job seeker. We're not trying to screen people out of work. We're trying to discover what they can do, where they're going to be most successful, what types of tasks, and really creating that portfolio to pitch to an employer to try to match with an employer's needs. We help job seekers develop a visual portfolio of employment, which helps them express their strengths and their experiences and who they are to an employer, because we recognize that many of our individuals with IDD have a hard time in a formal interview answering typical questions. So by having a visual portfolio, they can really express their traits, their interests, their hobbies, because they have that visual, they have a photo, and they have some words to help them. So it's a visual strategy to develop not only a positive interview experience or a positive first meeting, but also to develop common ground with coworkers, because they can express themselves to their coworkers, and coworkers can see where they have common ground, where they have common interests, and start to develop those workplace relationships. And then with the employer, as I mentioned, we really look at the employer's needs and try to develop this custom job description. So at this intersection between the job seeker and the employer, we develop that win-win, which is, I think, what is really driving the success, is that we're putting people in jobs they can do, that they can be successful and feel positive about, and that the employers really need to have done. And then we keep the communication lines open. We continue to sample for success, for satisfaction, for things that we need to do better. So we continually assess how we're doing and how we can change and improve. So the second key is really having a skilled, well-trained job coach or employment support specialist. And the employment support specialist will go in and really look at the job, the tasks, do a job analysis and a task analysis if necessary, to identify what is the person with a disability going to be asked to do, what level of performance, what is the expectation here, how should this be taught, knowing the person's learning style, what will be the best way to teach these job skills to them. So that is the role of the job coach, and to also support the employer, to support the coworkers. As Mark Bradford pointed out, for many people who are neurotypical and haven't interacted with people with disabilities, there's fear. They're not sure. Should I correct? Should I not correct? What should I say? How do I do this? So the job coach really meets those needs as well. They really coach the coworkers and the supervisors to communicate directly with the person with a disability, to give positive feedback, to use positive redirection, and to develop those positive workplace relationships that all workers need, and to celebrate success as it's happening, as this process unfolds and develops. Another thing that job coaches will do is to really pay attention to natural cues in the environment. And for people without disabilities or neurotypical people, it's things that we don't really notice that we're noticing, but they cause us to change or to do something differently. And sometimes those natural cues need to be made explicit for a person with a disability to respond. So that's another really important but subtle skill that a job coach would have in a new employment setting. And number 3, of course, is funding. Funding for the employment supports is very, very helpful and huge for the job seeker or the new employee to have the services of a job coach. Is fairly expensive if it isn't funded. So DARS, which is the Department of Adult Rehab Services in the state of Virginia, and other states it might be called vocational rehab, they are the primary source of funds for employment services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and for all disabilities. So in our area, DARS would do an intake and then would refer to an employment support organization. But getting the funding through DARS is really, really important and helpful in achieving funded job supports. Other sources are county funding, but they really want you to use DARS first before they'll release county funding for job coaching. And then private funding, donors, parishes, grants are all lesser utilized, but possible. And then this is short-term, like the first 3 months, say greater than 3 to 12 months, but continuing on can be funded through DARS for long-term follow-on, which would be like monthly check-ins, which are really, really important for people with intellectual disabilities, because the people with intellectual disabilities are usually extremely loyal and stay in positions where they're being successful, but supervisors might change, coworkers might change, and those are perfect times for a job coach to come back in and support, again, a new supervisor or a new coworker to ensure that that positive employment situation continues. So JARS can fund long-term supports. Medicaid waiver funding is another commonly used form of funding for long-term supports. And all three of the intellectual or the developmental disability waivers, the community living, the family and individual supports, and the BI waivers all support individual supported employment, all funded. And workplace assistance is another Medicaid waiver service that will provide job supports for people working in the community. That is funded through the community living and the FIS waiver. And then we have the local funding through Fairfax County self-directed services and private and family resources. So outcomes of inclusive, supportive community outcomes. Inclusive, supportive communities develop when we have inclusive jobs. Meredith is working at Paul VI in the Office of Development or Advancement, and she does data entry, she shreds, she files, she photocopies, she has a whole bunch of tasks that are part of her job. And then we have somebody who's working at a school, another person working in a school, categorizing manipulatives and in a resource room. And then Zach has type 1 diabetes in addition to his Down syndrome, and he was doing a lesson for his colleagues about diabetes because he has a lot of firsthand knowledge. Our outcomes, principals and parents really report positive changes around just becoming an inclusive culture. And the image of the school to the community and to the participants, to the employees of the school, really recognize that having inclusive jobs is really what being pro-life means. It's really walking that walk. Employees report that they have become role models. We've interviewed our people with disabilities who are working the schools. We've done probably 15 interviews, and things that they are noticing about themselves are pretty phenomenal. They are stating that they notice that they've become role models. One young lady told me that she now has hope because of her job, and that she feels closer to God. And another person said that her job was her dream come true. And another person said, I help, I get help. I encourage, I get encouraged. Let's go. And meaning let's do this some more. And recognizing that reciprocity in the employment setting is pretty phenomenal, because many of our people with intellectual disabilities have really never had that opportunity to be a role model, to feel like they're giving back as well as being served. Another picture of a young lady who is doing a coffee service at St. Mark's. And this is a volunteer job, but it really provided her with that opportunity to develop relationships, positive relationships with people with and without disabilities, to be in the community where she felt safe. Coming out of the pandemic was difficult, and she needed a place to work that she felt safe and felt encouraged, and this has really made a difference in her life. And then we have Morgan here, who has her blue eyeshadow on because it's celebrating 70s Day. Is that 70s Day or 80s Day? I'm not sure. But anyway, one of those dress up days where she's dressed up with her colleagues and happy to be included in this fun activity. And Henry and this young man started working at the Chancery similar times and met each other by having lunch in the break room together, and got to know each other and started that coworker relationship that is so helpful to people with disabilities to be able to develop these relationships outside of the home and feel like they belong to their workplace just like any of the other employees there. What we've learned that is working, that allows these positions to be positive for both sides, is that making a good match really is critical, is that matching the skills of the job seeker with the employer is really, really important to success, and makes the job coaching, makes the support plan make sense. It means the job coaching can be successful, that the job coach can fade, and that the person who is now doing the work can become more and more independent over time. And that independence, that autonomy, that self-esteem, it all grows together as learning and performance happens, it increases. Listening to the job seeker is key. Again, they have a good idea of what they like and don't like. Oftentimes they realize things that we don't. And it is recognizing that they have a need for autonomy and they have a need to advocate for themselves. So really listening is important. And we've found that out early. The first person that we thought was going to be great as the greeter role told us he did not want to be the greeter, and thought we were just really, it was crazy that we had made this decision without including him. So it was good that we asked. But he was really afraid coming out of the pandemic to interact with a lot of strangers. So he would have been incredibly anxious in that job. So he let us know that he was not interested in it. So then we went back to the drawing board and figured out where else he could work. And he's really successful in the Chancery doing the scanning in the Office of Architecture, which we'll get to a slide on that. But understanding the employer's process is also really, really important. The schools really approach the needs assessment, their needs assessment, very differently than the Chancery did. So I couldn't use the same form. I had to really come up with a new tool for the schools that was easy and quick for them to look at their needs when developing a job. The job coach it's really important, and it's really important that the job coach understands customized employment, that they can work in that framework, and that they understand that part of their job is instruction, is breaking down tasks into teachable steps. Not all job coaches know that, and not all frameworks make that a priority, but customized employment does. And so our job coaches need training to perform that way. And then parents and family supports are really, we could not have made these jobs without parents being on board to make sure that the DARS meeting happened, that they were qualified or eligible for funding, that they were referred to employment support organizations so that the job coaching could get paid for. Also, transportation is huge. So parents arranging for transportation, whether it's through Metro Access, whether it's through Uber, Lyft, the bus, or parents driving. But either way, that was those requirements really required parents to be involved to a high degree. But what are the benefits of work? We've already alluded to a lot of them, but the psycho-emotional, educational, and benefits are huge. People who are in these jobs are included in their work community. They are growing in their self-esteem. We see that increasing, and we see that idea of self-efficacy, that they can do things for themselves that they haven't been able to do before, and really being able to continue to develop. They're in jobs where they can continue to learn, take on new tasks, and grow, which is what we all want in a job. But in many jobs that are structured differently, that might be in a more segregated setting, are not always set up to develop the person further. So those are major benefits to the person with IDD from the health perspective, psycho-emotional health. From the economic standpoint and health as access to insurance, those are very, very real benefits as well. People have wages. My son receives a paycheck. It gets automatically deposited into his bank account. He goes into his bank account to check to make sure it gets there. It's very important to him because he knows he's paying his grocery bills out of that. And he pays attention to how much money is there and then how he plans to spend it. So it's raised his awareness, his money awareness, and it's important to him. And also with working and receiving a W-2, every person who works earns work credits that are recognized by the Social Security Administration. Those work credits add up and provide access to Social Security disability insurance. So SSDI is an insurance program. So for people who had a disability early in life from birth, and they start working early, they accrue those work credits and only need 6 work credits to become eligible for SSDI, which is different from a person who might become disabled later in life. They need 40 credits because the assumption is they worked longer before their disability occurred. So once those 6 credits are achieved by the person with a disability, they can apply for SSDI. And SSDI then makes them eligible for Medicare. So there's a 25-month waiting period after you achieve SSDI eligibility for Medicare. But Medicare is comprehensive health insurance. So once you have been eligible for Medicare, once you're eligible for SSDI in 24 months, you can have Medicare health insurance. For many people, that is huge because for many people with intellectual disabilities, they may have only access to Medicaid or they may be on their parents' insurance. And when the parents retire at 65 or their insurance ends at 65, they go on Medicare, but their disabled child may not unless they already have these credits achieved. So that's a really huge benefit of paid employment. I don't know if I should check the chat here. I notice there are people. Yes. Thank you. Yes, we don't screen out. We just screen for strengths. Okay. I'll go back. So the benefits experienced by employers. Employers can use this as a tool of augmenting their typical hiring practices so they can really hone in on their unmet needs. And when they hire a person with a disability, typically they're hiring very, very reliable employees. The employees who want to work, who show up, who tend to want to stay and really are very loyal, committed workers. Job coaches are a huge benefit to the employer. So, and the employer isn't paying for the job coaches, that is paid for through government funding through DARS. So that's a benefit. There are new staff dedicated to these tasks, which may have been overwhelming other employees or may have been backlogging the system. So that's a benefit to the system overall. Increased job satisfaction of coworkers is documented throughout the literature on inclusive work in communities. And I think it goes back to this idea that people are happy to learn new things. And so they see a person with a disability learning new things and excelling, but they also, I think, inherently recognize that they're developing new skills too. They're developing a comfort and ability to communicate and an awareness of a person as a human and as an image bearer, that they're getting that sense of the dignity of the human person by working with a person with a disability. And I think that inherently raises their satisfaction of their workplace. There is also through the literature this identification of improved communication and management skills of managers and coworkers. So as job coaches teach positive communication and positive reinforcement for the person with a disability, it also generalizes to managing others in the workplace. So there's literature that shows that managers become better managers and better communicators after working with a person with a disability. And then we go back to the improved efficiency and productivity of the organization. And of course, for us as Catholic communities, affirming life and the dignity of every human person is a benefit for us. I could pause if there's any questions. I feel like I've been talking nonstop, which I have.
Yes, Christine, there's actually a question in the chat about DARS funding that maybe you could
Okay,
address.
thank you. Let me look. I don't see it. Can you read it to me?
Sure thing. It
Oh,
says,
there.
will
Well,
DARS be the avenue for funding to gain work opportunities, even with the Chancery and the Catholic schools?
yes. Yes. So for every person who approaches Porto or emails me about finding work, one of the first things I encourage them to do is to reach out to DARS to open a case to get a meeting for an intake so that they can become eligible. Because it really is the best funding source available currently for job coaching. We have had clients who choose not to do that and who have to end up finding job coaches on their own and paying for them independently. And that's, it's a whole nother barrier to starting work. So my advice is to go through DARS and to try to get that funded. We fill a gap in the training in that we try to do that job analysis and provide the job coach with strategies and a very clear idea of what tasks are going to need to be taught. So they start out with a good launching point, but we, in order to have a job coach present on the job with a person starting a new job, it really is best to go through DARS for funding. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
So I see the comment about the backlog. There was a huge backlog coming out of, and I had to also go outside of DARS for my own child because of that. We've been pretty successful since we have, I guess, demonstrated success with creating these positions. We've been pretty successful that if we call, if DARS has, if a case has been open and a parent goes back to DARS and says, hey, my young adult with a disability has a job offer, they are ready to onboard, we need a job coach. They've been pretty quick to refer and get job coaches assigned. So what that's one thing that we have learned is that when we can create these jobs and they're paid positions, we can usually get a job coach assigned pretty quickly because we've done a lot of the work to creating the job. So it's been a successful collaboration between DARS, and mostly ServiceSource has helped provide job coaches quite a few times.
Christine, there's a number of other questions in the chat, but I think I'd like you to go
Keep
through
going.
these next two stories, and then we'll dive right back into the questions. So if more questions come up, please put them in the chat as we go along. But these next two stories are really just really great.
Okay.
And we have about 10 minutes left, Christine, just so.
Okay, thanks. So Jeanette is the greeter. She greets clients coming in or patients, people visiting the Chancery in the mornings. And in the afternoon, she collects all of the mail in the office building, which is 10 stories. And I'm going to let Jeanette talk for herself. Here we go.
Hi, Jeanette. How are you? Hi. You doing well today? Yes. Can you tell me, where do you work? I work at Diocese. I work at Diocese of a Arlington. I'm a prayer. I'm a creator devoee, and I am a assistant for this afternoon. This morning, I worked the police, for some in the elevator, and this afternoon, my coworkers gave me a lot of great meal. You do? Has your job changed your life? It is, yes. But then it's everything in my head. It's I want to say thank you for for the purpose, they give the job.
So Jeanette is doing an amazing job. And I really wanted everybody to hear her video because she does have some difficulty communicating, but it has not impaired her ability to work in the diocese. And she's matched up well with this position that was created. And her coworker's name is Mai, and Mai is the receptionist in the lobby. And she, Jeanette, in between greetings, she sits next to Mai. And then when somebody comes to the front door who isn't wearing a badge that is part of the diocese, she knows that person is a visitor, and she goes and she greets them and she walks them to the elevator, and she scans the elevator or swipes the elevator with her badge and lets them on, and then pushes the floor that they're going to, which Mai relays to her which floor to push. And then she says, have a great day, and they go up. Then she goes back and sits next to Mai, and in between she's observing what Mai does. And Mai went on vacation for a week, and so there was a substitute for Mai. And we discovered through the substitute's observations how incredibly successful Jeanette is. And so he sent a letter to share his observations with Ward Jones. And this was after he had worked with Jeanette. He said, "Good morning, Mr. Jones. I wanted to send my appreciation for your building greeter, Jeanette Simone. Yesterday, both the diocese temporary receptionist and I were unaware of the location of some of the forms distributed to clients. One client needed the information sheet for the Catholic Charities, and I have observed that your receptionist, Mai Pineda, usually gives this sheet to those in need. I have no idea where Mai keeps that sheet, but Jeanette is so observant that she knew exactly where the sheet was kept. She found one and gave it to me to give to the client. Her assistance in that instance was extremely helpful. Each time I work with her, Jeanette is also very precise about the lunch times of several offices, which close at various times in the noon hour. When I mistakenly send patients to doctor's offices at the wrong time, Jeanette gently reminds me of the time so that I do not follow through with my error. As you already know, Jeanette is very welcoming and helpful to all the employees and patients who come through the 200 North Glebe Road lobby. She's a tremendous asset to the property and a pleasure to work with." And I think that just sums up how she has surpassed our expectations, how she has grown as a result of her job, and how she's valued, and she knows she's valued. She's thrilled with her position, and she just, when you meet Jeanette and she's working, you just see it in her face. She's always so excited to be doing what she's doing at the diocese. And this is Marika, different profile. And she's working in a school, and I will let you hear Marika.
Okay, can you tell me your name?
Marika,
Where do you work?
St. Thomas More Cathedral School in Arlington. I'm a recess and lunch monitor and extended day aide. Seeing the kids makes me happy. Sometimes when I'm in the cafeteria, when the kids are eating their lunch, sometimes they'll say, "Can you help me open my fruit
Yeah.
container or a thermos?"
Uh-huh.
And they'll ask me, "Can I go to the bathroom or can I get a drink of water?" They ask me before they get up. The school is walking distance from the McDonald's and the Dunkin' Donuts and the Papuseria and the CVS pharmacy. The McDonald's is my favorite.
Probably those French fries, they're awful.
So I wanted to share that because I think it really illustrates how Marika realizes that the children see her as a resource, as a person of value, of some person who they respect and look to her for help. And I think for her, that's incredibly gratifying. The other thing that was just so cute was that she recognizes that working in the community gives her access to these other shops, these other opportunities to meet her personal needs, whether it's going to CVS or the McDonald's. But in either case, her self-efficacy, her autonomy is improved by inclusive work. Inclusive communities are reflective of the kingdom of God and flourish for God's glory. And I think back to Mark Bradford's Corinthians reading, that we see this in these inclusive employment solutions, that people are flourishing, and it's a really awesome, beautiful thing. A fuller life and belonging to the work community. Henry's supervisor saw this ad in either a Special Olympics newsletter or the O'Connell newsletter, but she brought it in because she posted it on the bulletin board where the compliance notices are. So it's no foul play here, and keeping the workplace safe was the idea. But just the shout out to Henry that he was doing some great things in the community and wanted to give him credit at work. So again, supervisors building those relationships in the workplace. And inclusive kingdoms, again, reflect the kingdom of God. And workplace inclusion in practice, what we're seeing is communities grow and more connections develop. And we know that numbers of connections of positive relationships relate to health. They have a positive effect on health and mental health. Previously unrecognized gifts become apparent, which builds everybody up. And I think that's true for both sides of the equation. Like I said, people without disabilities start to develop their appreciation and their comfort level around people with disabilities and see them as a person of dignity, inherent dignity given by God. And then the people with disabilities continue to grow and develop more and more strengths and abilities. And again, social connection, greater social connection is positively correlated with health. And my last slide, be the sunshine, be the living stones. And that's all I've got. Are there more questions?
Thank you so much, Christine. We are so grateful to you for your time and your expertise. And Christine really pours her heart and soul in this, and we are so grateful to her for what she does. And we want to let you know, there's a lot of questions very specific about DARS in the chat actually right now about what do I do if I'm not eligible for DARS. And I want to let you know that we are going to have a webinar with Christine on employment, and we can go more into the different funding streams, and we will be setting that up soon in the near future, because I really think there is so many questions here, and we really unfortunately are out of time because we have our next session starting in just 10 minutes. That'll be our panel presentation. So we hope you'll join us for that. But right now, I guess we have a couple minutes. Christine, there's a few questions about how do you find private job coaches, and what would you do for job coaching for someone who's more skilled, that maybe has, very skilled at computer programming, but has difficulty kind of with learning differences? What would you do? Or where could we find coaches for those people?
Okay, I would start with DARS. If for people who, again, for skills, we're looking at skills matching up with work with the employer's needs. So if somebody's highly skilled with computer programming and technology, that's the type of job I would be looking for. And we would develop a instruction plan based on what that job requires. And we would give, if in a best scenario would be, we would give that to a job coach who would be assigned through DARS funding from like ServiceSource Choice Group, Best Buddies. There's a whole bunch of job support or employment support organizations. And we try to stay engaged with the job coach because we recognize that job coaches turn over in these organizations frequently and oftentimes need support to do the job well. But it's the best we can do right now. Hiring a private job coach, my advice would be talking to people who work in the ABA field, because I find that a lot of those programs, a lot of those companies have RBTs who at least have a good understanding of developing a systematic approach, doing a task analysis, providing positive reinforcement. Those are all huge skills for job coaching. So the ABA field has RBTs, that's that entry-level position, who are supervised by a BCBA. That's a great way to find a really qualified job coach. The other way that I've done it is by putting an ad out on care.com and interviewing myself. But I think the easiest way to go about it is through DARS to get funded job coaches. And then we just try to support and bring them up to performance standards that are effective in the customized framework. Did I get all of them?
Yes, I think so.
Teens, summer jobs. I would really highly advocate for summer jobs. And you can, teens at the age of 16, you can register with DARS, and DARS can begin doing those summer experiences, providing job coaching and assessments during the summer. I think that would be great. But looking for summer jobs to develop some experiences